All right, let's stop building boring swipers. Let's build something fun like this. Let's build this cool card component. There's a lot going on. What's really fun about this is perfectly mobile friendly. So you just pull it up on your phone. You can easily swipe through this animation where it sort of moves them back. You can sort of click and drag and see it move. Ooh! That is just so nice. And what's really nice about what we're going to be building today is this connects to a blog collection. So we switch out the thumbnail on one of these blogs, and it's going to switch out in this component as well. Let's dive in. All right, so I'm going to show you how to write all of this code from scratch. You can go from nothing to having this swiper from scratch. But if you are a member, if you're a part of my Code Curious membership, you will have access to copy and paste all of this code if you want to just grab that and run with it. So on the toolkit over in the Explore Code area, you have access to my code catalog, which has hundreds of code snippets, copy and paste code snippets. And you can just follow the instructions in our simple gallery swiper. You'd also get access to our Chrome extension right here, which you can just pop it up right there, right in the Squarespace editor, go to simple gallery swiper, and again, follow the instructions there. You just need to put this code in your site header code injection area, which I've already done. You need to put this code in your custom CSS area, which is right here. I've already done that. And then you need to drop this into a code block on your website. Once you've done that, let's just drop it in right here. The only thing you need to adjust is on our Squarespace query right there. Make this the URL of your collection. That's it. So that's blog. And this is going to connect to my blog collection right here. That is the URL of my blog collection. And it just pulls in the items from that. So it's very simple. Again, if you're not a member, that's totally fine. We'll walk through all of this and I'll show you how to get this running. But if you are a member and just want to take this code, copy and paste, run with it, you're more than welcome to do that. All right, let's take all of this code out and start from scratch. There are two big components to what we're going to be doing today. First, we're going to be installing Swiper. Swiper is a JavaScript library that allows us to build these really fun, complex components like this, but it makes it really easy for us to do this and not only build it and maintain it, but also change out the configuration of it. So make it fade, or we can add arrows, or we can add dots. There's so much we can do with Swiper. It's really, really cool. The second thing, once we've got that built out, when it's built, we'd have to use HTML. We're going to have to write HTML, and that's going to be really hard for us or our future selves to go in and update and change things, or if we're handing this off to a client, for them to go in and update and change things. So we're going to learn, how do we connect the slides, the content of our swiper right here? How do we connect these to our blog items? How can we pull in the content from this? This part's really fun and cool as well. Lots you can do if you can understand that concept. So let's dive into the first thing, understanding Swiper. All right, so let's build this swiper. So there's a few components to it. The first, we need to import it from our CDN right there. Once we've imported it, then we're going to actually build the content of the swiper. We're going to need to use this HTML, and this HTML structure is important. We have to maintain a little bit of structure in this. We need to make sure some of these classes stay the same. Once we've done that, we can customize the slides a little bit more and what goes in the slides. Then we're going to add some CSS to make sure it's styled the way we want. And finally, we initialize it. And this JavaScript, this initialization, is what turns the swiper, just a bunch of static HTML, into a swiping component. So those are the four components to it. So let's start with importing from a CDN right here. So I'm just going to copy this right here. Control C. We're going to go over to our website. I'm going to hit / right there and search for the code injection area. I'm just going to drop that in right up there. I like to format this a little bit. I don't like those being on their own lines. Let's keep that space. And let's add a comment up here just for future me to know that this is for my swiper CDN. Swiper is used in a lot of different places too. So you don't need to add this for each swiper you add onto your website. If you see this already added, you don't need to add it again. You've already done it. So you don't need to duplicate this multiple times. Once you've done it once, you can use a swiper anywhere. Okay, let's start with part 2, which is building our swiper. So down here below, still on our Get Started page right here, down here we have our swiper HTML. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to put this into a code block on our website. So I'm going to edit. Let's open our code block. I've already added a code block. You can add one in using the block. Already added one. Let's paste that HTML in, and you'll see immediately we start to get some things happening. We see some slide 1 right there. We have these arrows right here. So some things are actually starting to happen. Now let's go back. Let's grab our CSS. Let's copy this code right there. Let's hit save. Let's go to our custom CSS area. So I'm just going to hit / and say, type in CSS right there. We're just going to paste in that little CSS. We should see this get the appropriate size and height right there. And then lastly, we need to initialize our swiper. So this is JavaScript. So this is some JavaScript. And because it's JavaScript, this is going to need to go between script tags. So I've copied that code. Let's go back to our code block. We're going to scroll to the bottom down here. Now, we want to put this code between script tags like this. I'm going to do an opening tag and a closing tag. So we have our opening tag, closing tag, same text, just with the / right there, space. Then I'm going to paste in what we just added. Now, this is important that it goes below the HTML because this JavaScript is going to reference the HTML. And if it's above, it's not going to see it. It's going to read the JavaScript first. It's not going to see the HTML, and it's going to say, okay, well, I'm just going to ignore that and move on. So this could also go in like your site footer code injection area, and we wouldn't have this embed script option, but I'll give you some CSS where we can hide this a little bit later. But this is good for right now. So let's just hit save and see what happens. Cool. Now we have a swiper. Now it's vertical swiper and it looks terrible, but we have a swiper. I mean, it is working on our page. If the functionality is there, if you hit the arrows, that's pretty cool. I can click and drag and sort of move it around. You see we have this nice little sidebar, scroll bar right there. So there's a lot going on. So first, we don't want this to be vertical. This looks really bad, right? So let's edit our code again. Edit, go down to our code. And there are a few things. Let's sort of look at what this JavaScript is doing so we can understand it a bit more. So this first bit, we're declaring a constant. We're declaring a constant variable, and that variable, we're calling it swiper. You could call this ASDF if you want, but we're going to call this swiper so future us knows what we're talking about. And we are initializing a new swiper component. Because we imported that code from the CDN earlier, we can use this keyword. We have access to this keyword. And what is this swiper doing? We are targeting the HTML. So this first parameter after our parentheses right here, this is targeting something on our page. That dot means it's a class, and it's the class of swiper. If we scroll up to our HTML, indeed, we have an HTML with the class of swiper. So this is important to know because if you have multiple on the same page, you're going to need to adjust this. So here is what I will recommend for doing this. Let's just take a moment right here. On this first element, I would give it an ID, and I would call this something unique. I'll just for be dumb, I'm going to call this swiper 1. Or rather, let's say swiper cards, because that's what we're going to end up building. Swiper cards. Because this is an ID, we're going to target it with a hashtag, and we'll call it swiper card. So now this first parameter, I've targeted this HTML, which has an ID of swiper cards. Now, after in our swiper right there, opening parentheses, what are we targeting? And then our second option after our comma right there is this whole object of things we can change, different variables we can adjust, properties and values. You can see we have a comment right here, just again for us humans, so we know what we're talking about. And the first parameter right here is direction. The first property right here is called direction. And you see it is called vertical. So it would probably make sense for us to change this to horizontal because I don't want this to go vertical. Now let's just stop there, hit save, and change. And now we have a horizontal slider. So this is great. Another thing you might notice is there were 3 dots. There it was. Did you see the 3 dots right there? Those 3 dots are in there because we can add or remove slides at will. So let's go into our edit. Let's jump in here. You see here are our slides again in our HTML, and it's just added ... We don't need that, but we can add, let's go to like 5 slides, right? I'm just going to copy those first 2, add more, 4, 5. And this is what is so nice about swiper. You just copy and paste more HTML. You just duplicate it, and boom, now we have 5 slides. All right, before I jump into just styling things, let's understand the HTML structure of what we're creating. So we have the swiper cards component, and that contains these 4 children. So it contains our swiper wrapper, which itself contains the children of these swiper slides, a swiper slide. Then it also has our next and previous buttons, our pagination, those little dots at the bottom, and then the scroll bar. So with that kind of hierarchical understanding of how this is written, we can see in the HTML, we have our swiper cards component, which holds all of that. Then we have our swiper wrapper right here and swiper slides in there. And then children, a sibling to our swiper wrapper is our pagination, buttons, and scroll bar. So with that sort of understanding, let's write the HTML or write the CSS for what we're going to use here. So I'm going to get rid of this. We won't declare the height right there, but I'm going to target our swiper cards right there, opening and close, and I want to target our, what's it called, swiper slide. So each one of our slides is what I'm going to give a height and a width to. So let's just say, we'll change this later. Height, 500 pixels, width, 600 pixels. So we'll change this to what we were before, 300 and 600. That's kind of what we started at. Now, let's do, just so we can see a difference, we'll say background, color, let's give it hashtag 333 just to make it easy so we can see things. We have these blue color. We'll learn how to style all of that. Add a border radius right there, border radius of like 5 pixels around our slide. So we get this nice little slide. The text color right there, you see it's really hard to see. So let's change the color to white, just so we can see things. And let's display that in the middle. So I'm going to say display grid. I'm going to give the layout of our slide a display of grid. And then using display grid, we can say place items into the center. So we're right there in the center. All right, a couple other things I will probably want to do is let's go into edit mode. Remember, we have this embed scripts thing. So I have some code over here. I'm just going to copy it from over here so we don't have to jump in the web inspector and look at everything. What we're doing here is preventing an overflow on our page. Sometimes we need to do that with the cards layout that we're going to be building. And then this code hides that script info right there. So let's just hit edit and you'll see, haha, it's not there. And now I can make this a bit smaller. So let's make this a bit smaller. Now, another thing, I can't go any smaller here because of the height that I've set on that slide. So let's go back. Our height right there is 300 pixels, but let's pull this out as a custom property, and I'll say slide height. We'll say, to make this clear, min slide height. And I like using min here. Minimum means the minimum slide height. So I want this to be the minimum height right here. And this allows, if the content is more than this height, it's not going to just get cut off. It's going to force the slide to grow larger. But the minimum is going to be this. And instead of that value, we're just going to use this as a custom property value right there. And what this now allows us to do is we can say when the body is in edit mode, this ampersand references the top level target right there, and we're changing our value right there. So I can hit edit and it'll drop down, and then this way we can adjust the sizing, maybe go all the way small. Then when we're not in edit mode, it's still going to be that 300 pixels. Okay, this is a good setup. All right, now let's move back to understanding Swiper over here, now that we've got this looking good, and what are all the options that we can adjust. So the first thing I want to get rid of is this stupid little scroll bar. Don't really need that scroll bar down there. So if we look in our editor right here, let's open up that code. I actually am going to pull this a little taller. If we look in here, we can see there's two things corresponding to this scroll bar. First is this HTML. So we have the component part to it. That's what the HTML is. Don't need that. So I'm going to delete it. And then secondly, in our JavaScript down here, you'll see we're also referencing it here. And we also don't need it here. So I'm going to delete it right there. All of those pieces. So I'm going to delete both of those. Let's hit save. Excellent. So now that scroll bar is not there. There are so many options that we can play around with down here. Direction, loop. How do we know what are the different values to use? What are the different properties? Let's dive into what those are. If we go over to back to the Swiper docs over here, if we go to our docs, there's the Swiper Core API, and we can see all of the different options. You'll see how big this page is right here. You can see how large this is. You can see all of the different options that we can use when building our swiper. So I just want a quick run through what are the top ones that you might want to use. First is loop. And it takes a Boolean value, which is true or false, and its default is false. And we can see all the different options that we can use, some other information about it. By default, our loop is set to true, or not by default. By default, it's set to false, but we're adjusting it to true. And what that allows us to do is we can loop through. So we're on slide 5, move it one more, and it goes back to slide 1. Another one I use a lot is this one called space between, and this takes a number or a string and its default is 0. So this is the space between each slide. We don't want to define this in the CSS because the JavaScript needs to know the exact spacing. So in here, we're going to edit this. I'm going to add another parameter. So after our loop right here, I'm going to hit space and I'm going to say space between colon, and then I'm going to give it a value. I'm going to say 17. Now it's important after you've added a property and a value to always add another comma. You always need that other comma. If you've added a slider and something's broken, make sure your syntax is correct. Make sure you've done the semi or the colon and then the comma. This 17 is the pixel value that we're going to have in between each slide. So if I hit save, let's go to edit. Now you can see as I slide, there's 17 pixels right there in between, right there. And I'm using 17 because that's the default spacing, that's the default padding that Squarespace uses for a lot of their components. So this just builds some nice consistency into Squarespace. Another fun one is slides per view. It takes in a number value, and by default, it is 1. And this is indeed the slides you see per view. So let's go into edit. Let's edit this. Let's look at what this would be again. Space, slides per view. You got to get the casing exactly right with the lowercase and uppercase, but I'm going to do semicolon. And how many slides do we want per view? I'm going to say 2. Be sure to add our comma. And let's just hit save and see what happens. So this gives us 2 slides per view. So now you can hit this and it'll go between. Another fun one that goes along with slides per view is slides per group. Slides per group. So let's play around with this one. Let's add in slides per group right under slides per view. Slides per group. And I'm going to say 2 as well. Now let's see what this does. So this is a great example of me breaking it. I have just broken it. And that is probably because, again, I didn't add my comma. So be sure to add your commas. You will break things. And now we have 2. But if I swipe, it slides 2. So the grouping of slides is 2. You will also notice I do this one on purpose because we have 5 slides in our group, 2 per view, 2 per group. That means we're going to have an empty space if we're going. So there are some fallbacks. There are some things you can't just jam any property you want in here. It's got to work within the system. And so if we were going to do this, we'd probably want to add one more slide so this doesn't just show up empty. Another more complex one, but very important one, is breakpoints. So we can adjust the slides per view, the slides per group at different breakpoints because this will look very bad on mobile. It's still going to force those 2 slides, and this might not look very good. Also, we might want like 5 slides on desktop and only 1 on mobile. So how do we do that? We can do that with our breakpoints. Now, it takes in an object, which is, again, this sort of curly brace syntax. So let's sort of walk through. One thing that I always like doing, I would always recommend, is just kind of copying from theirs if you're getting started. But you do have to eyeball, make sure you're getting the opening curly bracket and the closing one. So this opens and closes there, open and closes, final closing. So let's just copy this. Copy that whole thing. Let's hit edit, and let's drop this in as another parameter after our slides per group. Now, again, there are some things you can't adjust in here, and it tells you over here. So you can't adjust the looping. You can't have it loop on desktop and not loop on mobile. You can't do that, but we can adjust sort of the spacing and the slides we see per group. These are kind of the basic ones. So when the window width is greater than 320 pixels, then 2 and 20. If it's greater than 480 pixels, 3 and 30. So default, we have our mobile at 767 pixels on our Squarespace websites. So I'm going to just remove these, just those two, and I'm going to say default 767 right here. When the window is greater than 767 pixels, I want 2 slides and 17 pixels. By default, I want 1 slide. Let's get rid of groups. We don't need slide per group. 1 slide, 17 pixels. So this is going to be our default for anything. And then when the window is greater than 767, it's going to be 2 and 17. Let's take a look at that. So this is good. So we're seeing, again, we're forcing this width of 600 pixels. That's not what we want. So let's just change our width over here to 100%. And that's better. Oh, I think we forgot our comma as well. Always important to add that comma. I'm going to just not cut this out because it is important to see how easy it is to break something. Add that comma after our breakpoints object right there. Now we have our slide right there. And if we look on desktop, we have 2. Now, here's another little thing. Here's another little tip. I like to be super declarative. I like to make it really easy for myself what's going on. So instead of defining these out here, in here, I'm going to say I'm going to cut those, and I'm going to put another parameter in here. So at 0 pixels, we're going to start at 0 pixels. I'm going to put slides per group. And this is, let's just keep this comment so we know what it means. I'm going to paste that in. So when the window is greater than 0 pixels, we're going to do 17 and 1. Add a comma. Always be sure to add your commas after the properties. And then when it's greater than 767, we'll go to 7 and 2. And this just allows us to it allows me to just look at this one property to know where everything's changing. It makes it a lot easier. All right, another really popular one is our autoplay. And there's a number of different options. This kind of takes an object much like our breakpoints does. There's a number of different options you can use. I want to show you my favorite ones and the ones that I use on most things. Let's go to Edit. Let's drop in our autoplay parameters in here. Space. And there's a few things. I like to keep this organized so we have, make sure we're nesting. You nest items within inside our objects. So here's our autoplay object right here. By default, we're going to set this. I'm going to keep this on false and this on false as well. So this is the default object I would recommend for autoplay. So by default, it's not on. But you can easily come in and just turn this on. You don't have to find what are these properties called. You can turn that to true. Here's our delay. And this is another fun one. You can disable the autoplay once a user interacts with it. So that's what this property does. So let's just enable this to true. Change our autoplay is now enabled with a delay of 2500 milliseconds, which is 2.5 seconds. And every 2.5 seconds, that's how it works. And if we want to disable this on interaction, you can just change that to true. And then once someone interacts with it, hits the swiper, it'll stop autoplaying. So this allows people to play around with it a bit better. And lastly, let's get to the star of the show, the effect property. And we have all of these different options we can add in. By default, it's a slide. But what we're going to use today is cards. So let's add this in our code. After autoplay, let's change autoplay to false. Let's change that back to false. I'm going to say effect, and in single quotes, add in the comma just so the structure's there. I'm going to type in cards. And now we have a cards component. Now, we're having a bit of an issue there. Let's see if we can move forward. You see it kind of gets stuck. And this is part of the issue when we're using our cards component. You need to have a minimum number of slides. So right now we only have 5 slides. What I've found, if we have a minimum of 8, 8 is kind of the magic number for our card. So I'm going to change that to 6, 7, 8. And now let's hit save. And now we can do our cards like this. Ha 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 ha. And then it loops. So I will say that is only a necessary minimum if you want to have the loop on. And again, this is one of those things where you just can't jam a bunch of things in here automatically. You can see part of what makes this cards effect so cool is you can see the other cards. So it needs to have enough other cards to show in order for that loop effect to actually take place. All right. And I mentioned styling. We want to make the colors of these, not only we want to be able to customize them, but we want them to be able to match the color theme of our section, of the section that it's in. So here, I'm just going to paste these in. We have 3 properties, and these are all built right within Swiper. That's why you won't see references to them anywhere else. But that link, the CSS we added at step 1 when we were importing from the CDN, that includes references to these. So there's a few things. Our Swiper theme color, this is going to change the theme color of our arrows right there and our dots. So let's change our background color to make this a bit more readable. Let's go DE, DE, DE. That might be a bit easier. And we'll change our text color back to black, or we'll just get rid of that. Okay, so now we have this, and this is a bit better. And the color of these arrows is matching that of our heading large color. So whatever the color of your heading large color, this is your H2, is on this section, it will match. So this is why I like to use custom properties here, because it's going to match your color theme. Then we have 2 other properties, just the sizing of our arrows. I like them to be a little smaller. I think by default, they're 44 pixels. That's kind of the default size. Sure, go with that. And then the offset. So this is the offset of our arrows. It's nice to sort of inset them a little bit. Let's see if we can go negative. I'm going to say negative. Will it? Yeah, okay. So that works for this one. This might not work on all of them. Let's go to negative 100 because there is an overflow. Okay, no, that does work. I'm wrong. So you can do negative values here. That's pretty sweet. Love it. All right, for reals this time, now let's get into adding the content of our collection into these slides. Okay, for us to do this, we have to understand the secret little custom element that Squarespace has behind the scenes. As we're adding in our slides in here, we have these in here. We're writing this HTML, and we have to write each one of these. Squarespace, I've just put them in as divs. Squarespace, just within Squarespace, has their own special syntax for creating custom elements, custom HTML elements that reference other collections, so like our blog collection. And that's called the custom query tag right here. You can learn all about it. This is on Squarespace's docs. It's really cool. But what it does, instead of using that div, we're going to use something called this Squarespace query. Then we're going to declare which collection this is going to come from. So this is going to be the URL of that collection without the /. We can add a limit property right here. How many items do we want to pull in? 10, 8. You have a top level limit of 100. You can't pull in more than 100. And then you got to write the HTML that references some special properties that we can pull in, like the full URL. This would be the URL of that page. You could do title, which would pull in the title of that page. We're going to use asset URL, which is going to pull in that thumbnail image of that page. All right, so I've built this off screen, and we're just going to paste in what we have, and I'm going to walk you through it. So I'm going to paste it in right there. Again, within our Swiper wrapper, our opening tag and our closing tag of our Swiper wrapper, we're doing this. We've added in our Squarespace query, and this is going to pull in from a blog called collection with the URL of collection. I've set a limit to 20. I think I only have 8 items within that collection, so it's just going to pull in those 8. Now what it's going to do is loop through each one right here. We're starting the loop and ending the loop, and we're writing in HTML right there. So this HTML, again, this is that Swiper slide, so it's important that we have this in there. And then in our image tag, we're referencing the source is going to be the asset URL of each item. So I have 8 items in my collection. Let's just see if this pulls through. And we're going to get that error because my blog collection over here is named something different. So if I name the blog collection blog right there, which is what I have this connected as, it's pulling it in. So each item in our blog right here, 1, 2, 3, it's looping through each one of these. And as it loops through, it grabs specific context from each one of these items. And so that's what's happening. Let's go back to our swiper gallery right here. That's what's happening here. We're looping through right here, and then we're building the slide, and then it's grabbing the context of whichever item that we're on. And so the context is going to be the source, HTML. This is going to be our thumbnail. We're adding some alt text that is the title of that item, and then just a class, just a little class right there. We can use some CSS to target that class and make some adjustments. So you could even, if you wanted to, you could put some text in here that's like H2, title. We're going to use those curly brackets. This isn't a tutorial about how this works. That might come later, but I just want to give you an understanding, a high-level understanding that you can pull in. So these are all the titles of that. You can use this. This is very, very powerful, and there's a lot we can do. But right now, we're just going to focus on that thumbnail. All right, and finally, I want to give you the CSS. Let's go back to our custom CSS area. You did /CSS. So let's go back to this custom CSS area. Instead of this, we're going to paste in this. This is the code that you'll get if you are in the code catalog, if you're in the code membership. You'd just be able to copy this and you'd be good to go. And this is everything you saw at the beginning. So these are just our swiper colors that we're declaring, different font sizes. I've added a border radius property, which defines the border radius of our image. So we could change that down to 0 if you wanted, whatever you want. We'll leave that at 10. Then we're targeting our slide. Each one of those slides, we're giving it an aspect ratio of 3:4. You could go back to 16 by 9, and that would be sort of our default level right there. But change your aspect ratio to be whatever you want. And then this is just the styling for that image. So this is the styling for the thumbnail that we brought in for this element right here. And this is how we create a beautiful sliding swiper right within Squarespace. All right, and that's how this works. Like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Would love for you to become a member where you would have access to just all the code that's just available. You just copy and paste this code. If you want to build this really quickly within your Squarespace site, you can just become a member over on my website. I'll add a link down below. Otherwise, let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.